Welcome to Season 10, Episode 4 of the Ubuntu Podcast. In this episode, we're going to give away all Ubuntu Marte secrets. We also have some GUI Love, and we'll go over your feedback. I'm Mark, and joining me this week are Alan.
Hello.
And Martin.
Hello, hello.
How are you fine gentlemen this evening?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Not too bad, thank you.
I'm good too.
Excellent.
Good. Then we're all good.
Yes. Mark, what have you been doing?
I went to a very noisy gig.
What's a gig and why was it noisy?
What's a gig? It was noisy because I saw some very noisy metal bands.
Was it quite recently?
It was quite recently.
Is this why your voice is a bit hoarse?
No, I wasn't performing. I was.
Oh, I thought you might be singing along to their, popular beat
didn't
combo.
Take the ukulele and hook it up to a Marshall amp or anything then?
No, I went and saw Devin Townsend at the Hammersmith Apollo, and it was very, very enjoyable, but I forgot my earplugs, which made the following day a bit less enjoyable.
Huh.
Do you dive down into the mosh pit? Is that still a thing?
You sound like such a dad.
Yeah, I am a dad.
Twice.
No, I was in seating, but I occasionally dive into a mosh pit. Yes,
It's weird. I can't remember the last time I went to a music concert, and actually, yes, I can. And I'm not going to tell you who it is.
One Direction?
No, a lot longer ago than that.
Oh, I see. Phil Collins.
I don't know. It's just really weird. I remember going to the local goth place here, and on the A30, which was called the Agincourt.
Oh yes, I've been there.
Yes, I thought you might. And I just see people jumping around at the front, and I just couldn't fathom why anyone would do that. No,
it's good fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Everyone, gets what they're given.
Oh, really?
Gets what they're given. Gives as good as they get. That's what I was trying to say.
That's probably better. Yes. That's probably a bit fairer, I would have thought.
Anyway, shall we end this madness?
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, please.
So, let's talk to Martin. Hello, Martin.
Hello.
We have this stupid running joke that's been going for a while, where we don't mention the distro that shall not be named, which is, or sometimes known as Ubuntu Marte, which is basically
Sometimes, yeah.
Yes, Ubuntu Marte, which you work on in your spare time, your copious spare time in between all the other stuff. And I thought we should spend a bit of time talking to you about it. So basically, so that we can compact all that talking about it into the next 15 minutes. And then we can go back to not talking about it for the rest of the season. But knowing that we've paid you the lip service of talking about it for 15 minutes at some point. Is that fair?
Sounds fair, yeah.
Good. So, where should we start? How long has Ubuntu Marte been around now?
It's been an official flavour for 2 years, and it was around 6 months before that. So about 2.5. Oh, it's nearly 3 years now. So it was 3 years in June.
Good Lord.
Do you remember that? It's
yes.
sitting in your kitchen.
I was going to say, wasn't it Alan's
June.
fault?
It is all your fault, Alan, yeah.
Yeah.
You actually made the very first version. I don't think people know this.
No. I try and I was chatting to Stuart Langridge earlier today, and I was passing on something to somebody else, and they asked me for some information. I said, "Oh, it's over on Stuart Langridge's GitHub page," and I gave them the link to Stuart's GitHub page. And Stuart said, "Well, technically it was yours." And I said, "Well, yeah, but you wrote all the code, you did all the work. I'm just the ideas man. But being an ideas man doesn't really count for much on your CV." So yes, for Ubuntu Marte, I was a bit of an ideas man early in the start of the project, but I've committed zero code to the project. So
still credited as co-creator.
So what is different about Ubuntu Mate and normal Ubuntu?
Well, the big difference is that Ubuntu proper has the Unity desktop environment and Ubuntu Mate has the Mate desktop environment in its place. Much like the other flavors, Ubuntu has LXDE currently. Eventually it'll have LXT, and Ubuntu has XFCE, and so on and so on.
And is it just, you have an Ubuntu base and then you get upstream Ubuntu Mate and stick it on there, and then that's about it? Or do you do lots of other stuff to it as well?
Originally, it was just a desktop replacement, but we have sort of carved out our own tools and utilities now. So I think Ubuntu Mate is most well known now for its welcome screen and its software boutique, which do things quite differently from how things have gone before. And I'm really pleased to see that other projects have sort of picked up Ubuntu Mate Welcome and the Software Boutique, and we're starting to see derivative projects now in other distros, which is really good.
So, if you were before Ubuntu Mate existed, obviously Mate the project existed and Mate Desktop existed, and it was available on multiple distributions. You could get it on Debian, right?
Yep.
And there were other distributions like Linux Mint, for example, which is a derivative of Ubuntu. So there was upstream from us, there's Debian where you could get Mate, and downstream from us, there's Linux Mint where you could get Mate, but there was no real, in the middle, nobody really made a Mate desktop based properly on Ubuntu, which is kind of what you're fulfilling, isn't it?
Yeah. And, if your Ubuntu history doesn't stretch back very far, way back, Ubuntu used to be based on the GNOME 2 desktop, and Mate is derived from the GNOME 2 desktop. So there's a lot of nostalgia source in running Ubuntu Mate, because for a lot of people, it takes them back to the heady days of their first encounters with Ubuntu, because it looks and works pretty much identically to how Ubuntu used to work.
Is it brown?
Back then. It's not brown anymore. No, it's green. It's all eco-friendly and beautifully green. But so, it takes the Ubuntu themes as a base and sort of tweaks those a little bit to suit Mate.
So the one misconception people feel, I think, about Ubuntu Mate or about Mate in general is that it's software from the past bodged so it works on a distro of the current. Right? And that's not the case. It's not basically GTK2 recompiled so it works on the latest version of the kernel and stuff, is it? Correct.
It's interesting, actually. It's not a very glamorous project to work on, but the people that work on it are very dedicated. So its lifespan has really been about moving to all the new libraries and technologies and preserving that classic desktop environment and preserving the way it works and all of its features and functionality. And that's been quite challenging. So, for example, we've just had the Mate 1.18 release, I think it was last week, and that is now a fully GTK3 implementation, runs on the latest version of GTK 3.22. So along its history, we've jettisoned the GTK2 code and adopted all of the GTK3 stuff. And likewise, there's all manner of underpinning. So something that's new recently is libinput is now being used for mouse and keyboard and input devices, which is the current technology and the current way to do that sort of thing.
And is that user visible changes?
No, not really.
and also following on from that, you're saying moving from GTK2 to GTK3, is that user visible? I mean, all my widgets going to change? Are the toolbars different? Are the close button big and fat? And is it going to look like a mobile phone interface on my desktop?
No. So another confusion that we see sort of among a group of people in the Linux community is they think that GNOME 3 and GTK 3 are the same thing. So if you're using GTK 3, everything has to look like GNOME 3, and that's not the case. So although it's GNOME 3, it looks
You mean
like
GTK3?
it used to. Sorry, yeah, it's GTK3.
Dong.
It
Still
looks like it
92.
always used to.
Right.
There are some areas where you can't preserve the look and feel exactly because there are changes in GTK3 that simply don't work that way anymore. But by and large, it's indistinguishable. But making it indistinguishable has been a monumental effort, and it's even going on right now. So we're a couple of days away. In fact, as we record this, Ubuntu Mate 17.04 final beta would have been out for a week. And the work that we've been doing in the evenings and weekends for the last couple of weeks has all been on theming. And this is really polishing the look and feel of Mate now that it's exclusively using GTK3.
So,
and we've had some good help along the way there as well.
So given that you've had to put in quite a lot of work to do this, but you've also put in quite a lot of work so that it won't really make a difference to the end user, why should people care?
Well, the reason I started the project, and this story is well known, so I'll be brief, is I had members of my family who were running Ubuntu 10.04, which was based on GNOME 2, and they were perfectly happy with the way that their computer worked. And Ubuntu Mate came about because I tried them on Arch with Mate, and that didn't work for them. So Ubuntu Mate was born through Alan's ideas.
Yeah.
And so it's really for people that just prefer to use their computer that way, that prefer to use their computer with a traditional desktop environment. And hopefully we've made enough compelling things to make that user experience simple and quick to use through Ubuntu Mate Welcome and the Software Boutique, which brings people up to speed and gets them the software that they probably need to use to get stuff done as quickly as possible without having to bring them to the command line for anything.
If I was being rude and disingenuous, I might say that the people who are continuing to use Ubuntu Mate are possibly refuse-nick neckbeard Linux users from the past, 1990s Linux guy, right? Who just refuses to use anything new because it's new and old stuff is better and the new stuff is rubbish, right? And is there a danger that those people are slowly going to die off and your potential new audience aren't going to be there because they've been brought up on the new desktop paradigm, and they never
know, really.
They never lived through the heady days of GTK2.
So certainly from the nostalgia point of view from the Linux users, then yes, there's definitely a nostalgia win there for Ubuntu Mate. But when you look at the majority of the desktops that are out there these days, KDE Plasma, the current version of KDE Plasma, still operates like a traditional desktop environment. And that's also true of XFCE, and they're now embarking on their GTK3 porting efforts. The same is true of LXQt and LXDE and the Lumina desktop from the BSD camp. Even Unity 7, a lot of people claim that it's not a traditional desktop environment, but it doesn't do header bars. It has the dock down the side instead of at the bottom. And Mac OS 10 is a traditional desktop, and even Windows 10, for the most part, is also a traditional desktop environment. So there's only a few desktops that are really sort of breaking away from those traditions. So I still think there's an audience out there for a traditional desktop environment.
And there's a new audience as well. You get a lot of people using Ubuntu Mate on single board computers. Like, yes. Whenever I see someone share a video of, with some random Chinese company that have created a new single board computer and they show off the desktop, there's quite a lot of them have Ubuntu Mate or even just Mate itself as a demo on their demo video showing that it runs Linux. And similarly for the Raspberry Pi, there's a nice image of Ubuntu Mate there. So you are getting new users that aren't the, older people. It's quite the opposite, isn't it?
Yeah. Definitely, the SBCs are the most popular platform for Ubuntu Mate, and well, I don't know if it's the most popular for Mate, but like you say, you see it an awful lot. The Odroid images are not Ubuntu Mate. They say it's Ubuntu, but it's Ubuntu with the Mate desktop, for example, and the same is true on Banana Pi and some of the others. So Mate is definitely proving popular there because even on the most low power of these SBCs, it can sit in the RAM happily and it can run quite happily. No issue. Something
that Alan sort of tripped over there, which I think is interesting, is it sort of seems like Mate and Ubuntu Mate have become synonymous in a lot of people's minds. Is that in any way like a problem for the project? In, like, for example, you being either credited or blamed for stuff which is actually nothing to do with you, that's just upstream Mate stuff?
There is some conflation of Mate and Ubuntu Mate. For example, if you look at all of the review videos of Mate 1.18 on YouTube, they're actually reviews of Ubuntu Mate 1704, and they're just completely confused. But part of what I started doing for the Mate team a few years ago, maybe longer now, maybe 4 years ago, I can't quite remember, is I was looking for a role in the team, and basically Mate was actually quite decent, but nobody was talking about it, and very few people were using it outside of Linux Mint. So part of my remit was basically to popularize it. By popularizing it, you want people to use it, and when people use it, then you get developers. So that was the whole point. And Ubuntu Mate is an extension of that to some extent as well. It's in the goals of the project to grow the audience of Mate users, to attract more developers, and we definitely see that. Whilst the core team remains very small, there's only 4 of us that commit regularly and talk to each other on IRC on a almost daily basis. We see lots more drive-by commits now, and lots of maintainers for sort of specific parts. So we've got a guy who works almost exclusively on the archive utility, and another guy who actually works for HIPRA, who's the accessibility company in France, and he works exclusively on the accessibility stack. So whilst it can be, I'm mindful of it, but overall it's good for Mate as a whole.
And with you filling that gap in the middle that I mentioned earlier between our upstream Debian and our downstream Linux Mint, so would I be right in thinking that there's now some kind of alignment between upstream Mate and Debian, Mate and Ubuntu, Mate and like Linux Mint? So by 1704, maybe sometime after that comes out, everyone will be on the latest version of Mate because it's you doing the same work in all those places.
I've tried really hard to make that happen. So the current state is I am one of the Mate maintainers in Debian. So I do all of the Mate packaging and development work in Debian and let that trickle into Ubuntu. So always target Debian, get it in Ubuntu. And there's been some really nice reviews, early reviews of like Debian 9 release candidates. And people are saying, heck, this is a Mate desktop I could use on Debian, because they've had the benefit of me working on Ubuntu Mate for 2 years, and everything except for branding and Ubuntu Mate welcome is in Debian now. So you get all that good stuff on Debian, nice, which is terrific.
Yeah.
Where it falls down is myself and one of the core Mate team who works on Mint. He and I keep our packages in sync between Debian and the reference packages we have in the Mate GitHub. Unfortunately, Clem from Linux Mint doesn't take any of the work that we do either in Debian, Ubuntu, or the reference packages, and spins his own packages. And that's frustrating because it duplicates effort. And if his packaging isn't right and the library's missing, you can have bugs in the Mint implementation that don't exist elsewhere. And that's difficult to pick apart. So the last part we tried to address, we haven't quite got there yet, but maybe one day.
Right. Cool. And the final thing I just wanted to ask, you're doing this all only in your spare time because you still have a job at Canonical, and that's nothing to do with Ubuntu Mint. But God, I've managed 15 minutes and not said Ubuntu Mint. I usually do. So it's entirely separate from your job at Canonical. This is just a spare time thing, right? Yeah,
it was a spare time thing before I joined Canonical, and it continues to be so. And in fact, this cycle, the 1704 cycle, is the least amount of effort that I've put into an Ubuntu Mate release. What that meant is that actually Christmas and New Year was a massive cram trying to land as much of the stuff I wanted to get in around the New Year period. And then I've had a bit of a panic the last 2 weeks because I realized just how close we were to a release, and I've just been working like a mad thing in the evenings to actually line everything up and get everything out. So we had this whole Marte 1.18 release panic in order to land it in Ubuntu Marte in time. So yeah, it's very much a spare time endeavor.
So when is the next image being built for 1704 that you would want people who are listening to this to test out 1704 Ubuntu Marte?
Right now, the final beta image is available now as you listen to this, if you're listening to it within a couple of days of publication.
Let's don't start that.
Yeah, I know. It's available now. It's available now. So are all of the other flavors as well. So even if you're not an Ubuntu Marte user and you want to help one of the flavors that you do use, go and download their final beta, give it a test drive, ideally on hardware. If not, a VM will do. And if you find any bugs, please file the bugs, because without that feedback, it's very difficult and often frustrating when you get to final release and everybody says, yeah, I knew that bug existed. It's been there for weeks and you didn't know about it.
Awesome. Well,
cool.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
We should have you on the show again. And,
got it out of my system. I think we said Ubuntu Marte and Marte quite a lot there. That should tide me over until at least next week, probably.
Thank you very much.
That GUI love. If there's an app that you've been using that you just have to tell everyone about, email your GUI love to show@ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it's time for some GUI Love. And this week's GUI Love is maps.me. And
That's not you.
This is an offline mapping app for Android and iOS, which uses OpenStreetMap data, and also does turn-by-turn navigation, much like Google Maps or other navigation apps do. And
wow,
it's quite cool.
When you say offline maps, does that mean you can download like the whole country or just the portions of the area that you're interested in?
Yes.
Both of those?
Yeah, so you can do it by region, or you can do it the whole country, or you can do the whole world.
And is it easy to do by region?
Yeah, basically, I think it looks at where you are and then says, do you want this area by default? And you can move around and it will say, oh, you're here now, download this map. Or you can just go to the thing and say, I want all of the UK, for example.
Right. So if I know I'm flying to Amsterdam, I can pre-download all of Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Excellent. And this is an app for Android and iOS that you can just get from the relevant stores.
Yes.
You can also get it from the F-Droid store on Android.
My next question.
Yes, because it is open source as well.
It is. It's on GitHub. There's if you go to github.com/mapsme, it's the source code is on there.
Yes.
So other than being, open source and what have you, why would you choose to use this over something like Google Maps?
Because it's the app itself is open source. It also uses OpenStreetMap data, which has been shown in some cases to be more up to date than proprietary mapping data.
Interesting.
Also, it's quite nice looking. The other app I've used along this line before is Osmand, OSMAND, which does the same sort of thing. It has offline maps and navigation, but it's a lot clunkier and doesn't look as nice, whereas this is a very modern looking app with a very sort of good navigation engine. So, if you want something which isn't Google Maps, or if, for example, if you're trying to use a phone without all of the Google apps installed, but you still need some sort of navigation thing, this is a very good option.
Excellent. I'm going to check this out.
I notice also there is a Debian directory in their source tree. So I don't know if there's a deb for it or whether they build for some mobile platform that's based on debs like the Nokia N900 or something like that. But I think, like, in answer to the question about why would you use this over Google Maps, the fact that it is open source and uses OpenStreetMap is awesome. And also, if you go to the GitHub page, the title of the web page has like an emoji in it, which makes it brilliant. So the title bar of your browser actually has a map of the world in your title bar. It's really bizarre. So yeah, that is enough for me. That makes
the Alan Pope seal of approval.
Absolutely. Awesome. Good one.
There's always room for more feedback. On our website, each episode has its own comments, so post yours on ubuntupodcast.org.
And now it's time for some of your wonderful feedback. I think I might have clapped quite loudly in front of the microphone then. I'm so enthused about this, sorry.
So excited about this.
Yeah, it's like it can't. Anyway, I'm excited about the email from Don Wood. He sent an email to us at show@ubuntupodcast.org.
I'm a big fan and long-time listener. Thanks for all you do. I'm looking for advice before the impending doom that is end of support.
Oh.
While I run several flavours and distros on my other machines for the last 5 years, my main productivity machine has been running 12.04 LTS. When 14.04.1 came along, I imaged the box and upgraded. Sadly, too much broke for me and too much broke for me to be without this box while I sorted through the issues, so I restored the old 12.04 image. I tried this again with 14.04.2 and 0.3, but still no joy. I'm using it in what was called GNOME Classic mode. My working theory is that my port upgrade experience was because 14.04 changed the port for Classic mode. The end of LTS support for 12.04 means I can no longer kick this particular can down the road. Over the years, I've installed many packages that I only use occasionally, so would probably miss on an initial go. Then there is all the tweaking to get back to a productive environment, hence the 3 years of procrastination. Ubuntu Marte, thanks Martin, seems like the best fit to give me the classic desktop on a supported version going forward. If memory serves, Debian used to have a tool that would take inventory of everything installed, so one could install and then script it all back to install the difference. One could then merge back the home directory and Robert's your mother's brother. Did Ubuntu ever create a similar tool? Any advice on the best way to get moved from 12.04 to Marte 16.04 LTS with the least pain will be greatly appreciated.
Well, first of all, I don't remember this Debian tool. Does anyone remember?
I think
such a thing?
I think he's talking about depackage, get selection, set selection.
Right. Yeah,
I believe we
did
had this as a command line love.
We have, and we generally recommend you don't use it.
Yeah.
There is a better tool, but get selection and set selection has a flaw, and that is that when you do the set selection, you're forcing the package manager to think that every single package is manually installed and wasn't installed only by virtue of another thing being installed, which is not the best way to install packages.
Right. So this means that if you then uninstalled something, it wouldn't recognise the only things with dependencies and auto-remove them.
Yeah.
Right.
So I've been through this route with my father-in-law, who ran Ubuntu Marte 14.04. And when he upgraded to 16.04, he actually wanted to change to an SSD, so we did a fresh install. What we did there was, as you say, a complete backup of the home directory, and then a fresh install of 16.04 and a complete restore of the home directory. And then at that point, installed the applications that he had been using. Now, he had the advantage that he was my use case for creating Ubuntu Marte Software Boutique. So he was able to go in there and just click a few buttons to get back all of the applications he needed. And they handled all of the transition from the slightly older configurations to the newer ones. And he was back up and working again. I would suggest you do the same. Back up your home directory, do a clean install, restore your home directory, and install any applications that you need in the meantime. And take a look at the Software Boutique, because that will really help you get there.
Another option you might want to try, given that you've mentioned this is 12.04 and it's old, maybe it's time you bought a new hard drive, and maybe that new hard drive was an SSD, and maybe you put the existing one on the outside in a USB enclosure, so you keep it, and install on a new, clean, fresh SSD, which will give you a bit of a speed bump as well. And then you've got your reference on the other external disk, which you could also use for backups later on if you really wanted to. You
could even boot into as well.
Yes, true. Yes, if you ever want to boot into it and get stuff out of it. Yep. All good stuff.
Right, Daniel66666 posted a comment on our website.
You should get Chris Weir on the show. He'll provide plenty of banter.
Do you know who Chris Weir is?
Nope.
He's a Linux YouTuber, I think from somewhere in Wales. Well, we'll bear that in mind. We are going to be looking to expand our guest presenters this year. We'll see if he's interested, maybe.
I've already expanded far too much.
I'll tell you what, let's try this out. Chris Weir, do you listen to the Ubuntu podcast? If you do, get your people to call our people. And finally, I'm being Mark now. Oh, it's me. Laura, yes, that Laura, posted a comment on our website.
Oh, I can't do the accent. Congratulations on making it to double-digit season numbers. I can't do it in my own voice either, apparently. Just goes to show how forward-thinking we were with that leading 0 back in 2008.
Hashtag doubters. Brilliant. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks, Laura. And David Apps emailed in response to an email he sent in the last show, or the previous one to that even.
When you discussed my previous message, Mark helpfully pointed out the difference between something working and something being supported. I thought that I was already aware of this difference, but I can clearly understand that my message did not give that impression. So I'm not complaining, and I'm writing it again to try and clarify the point that I made so poorly in my previous message, and to check that I'm not misunderstanding the insight Mark was sharing in his response. What might make it harder for a web developer to support a browser on GNU/Linux when they support the same cross-platform browser in Microsoft Windows? What sort of things might not work in a cross-platform browser like Mozilla Firefox on GNU/Linux that work in Mozilla Firefox on Microsoft Windows?
So just to sort of better explain what I was briefly trying to say in the last show, when a company says, in this situation where they support certain browsers, it doesn't necessarily mean that the developer was, tested on Firefox and thought, well, I've done this really specific thing which will only work on Firefox and Chrome on Windows, and therefore we'd better say that it doesn't support Linux. What it generally means is they have support staff who will have done testing on a particular platform and will have that platform available if someone complains that something doesn't work, where they can talk the people through the problem and give them support. It's not really about whether the site will actually work, or, as we might think of it, be supported on a particular platform. So it's a lot easier for them to say we support Windows and Mac OS than it is to say, and we support Linux, and then have to deal with people saying, oh, it doesn't work on distro X, and then them having to work out how to debug the problem on distro X.
And you can already cite examples of stuff that works on the exact same browser on one platform but not on others, because the back end does some kind of user agent sniffing, and so they detect and just don't work because they don't support that setup, because the browser is different. So, for example, Chrome on Linux for a long time wasn't identical to Chrome on Windows. And so Netflix, for example, worked on Windows but refuses to work on Linux. Now that we've got past that, and it does work, but only because the guys at Netflix actually asked us what user agent string are we going to use and make sure this library is installed, and then it will work. So there are occasions where, I agree with what Mark says, but there are occasions where there are actually technical differences between the way it runs on one platform and the way it runs on another.
And that's the end of the news. No, feedback. Oh, goodness. Play a sting.
Oh, we made it through.
Just about.
Well, that's all for episode 4. We'll be back next week where we'll have more news, comment and discussion, and maybe a special guest. You never know.
Ooh, let's hope so.
And
go on.
Yes. Nope.
No. Nothing.
Good.
I was going to mention something that's
Don't
going to be in
jinx
the
it, for
next
goodness sake.
show after that.
Okay.
But not in the next show. But
Right.
you'll
Yes,
find
be
out what
quiet
that is
about
next
that.
time.
Shh.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Just stop recording.